What's up, guys?
Today, we have an interesting video. Now, to be honest, we don't really like talking about politics on this channel, and we plan to keep it that way. But this video has nothing to do with recent events, although, with everything going on, I thought it would be cool to explore the hidden history of politics. I'm not going to comment on any of the things that have been happening recently, but I do think exploring the subject from a historical point of view may shed some insight on some of the things happening today, as many find themselves being completely polarized on one side or the other, engaging with the puppet show. We are fed this idea that we, the people, actually have a choice in our leaders, and that someone's going to save us from the elites. And it doesn't have to be blackpill to suggest that everything is staged or planned. It sounds depressing, yes. However, it's only when we separate ourselves from the media, regardless if it's mainstream or the opposition, that we can begin to see that what's happening today has been going on for a very long time. I mean, really think about it. Why do you think there are only two parties? You are either Democrat or Republican. But did you know that the Democrats and Republicans used to be a single merged party? We all know the saying, two wings of the same bird, and there is some truth to that, but it goes even further. If you suggest that these parties are controlled by the same people in the modern day, you usually get labeled as a conspiracy theorist. You're crazy for believing in some shadowy cabal that's pulling all the strings. This has become quite the meme. The Illuminati or Freemasons are in control of everything. Usually this is met with laughter and ridicule from those who are completely engrossed with the mainstream narrative. However, where do you think these ideas came from? Would it surprise you to know that the very first real political party, technically the one with the first real platform, was actually the anti-Masonic Party? This is a historical fact, and this history usually gets swept under the rug. Not too many people are aware of this unless you thoroughly have studied politics, and even then it's merely a footnote. This history is very surprising because it sheds light into the early days of politics in America, and the origin of all these conspiracy theories, which are not conspiracies. They're genuine concerns of elites and corporations influencing what we believe to be a democracy. This isn't new, and was literally the platform of the first real political party. Technically, it is the third political party, but as we'll see, the first two did not really have a platform. They were just federalist versus anti-federalist, central government power versus state power, but they had no real message or overall values outside of that. In order to understand this, let's dive deep into the mysterious history of politics in the United States, and let's see if there's any substance to this idea that modern-day politics is simply a puppet show. In the ancient world, politics was already shaping societies and dividing people into factions. In Rome, the struggle between the populares and optimates reflected tensions between common people and aristocrats. Julius Caesar, a popularis leader, faced off against senatorial conservatives like Cato the Younger. This rivalry eventually culminated in civil war, with Caesar's assassination marking a pivotal moment in Roman political history. Ancient Greece, which we're told is the birthplace of democracy, saw its own political divisions. In Athens, citizens might align themselves with leaders like Pericles, who championed democratic reforms, or more conservative factions that preferred oligarchy. The Greek city-states' political experiments from Athenian democracy to Spartan militarism laid the groundwork for many political concepts that we still grapple with today. Fast forward to medieval Italy, and you'd find yourself in the midst of the conflict between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. This was a complex web of political, economic, and religious tensions that divided cities and families. The Guelphs generally supported the Pope, while the Ghibellines backed the Holy Roman Emperor. This conflict shaped Italian politics for centuries, influencing everything from city planning to artistic patronage. But what exactly is politics? Politics is the art and science of governing. It involves making decisions that apply to members of a group, whether that's a small town or an entire nation. It's about how power is distributed, how resources are allocated, and how conflicting interests are managed. The transition from ancient and medieval political systems to modern ones was a gradual process, sparked by significant social, economic, and philosophical changes. The Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment played crucial roles in this evolution. As feudalism declined and trade expanded, a new merchant class emerged, challenging the traditional power structures of monarchy and aristocracy. Now, of course, this is the story we're told on how the common man challenged the prevailing power structures. Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke, Montesquieu, and Rousseau proposed new ideas about government, individual rights, and the social contract. These ideas spread through books, salons, and universities, influencing a generation of political activists and revolutionaries. It was against this backdrop of intellectual ferment and social change that Europe's modern political landscape began to take shape in the 17th and 18th centuries. In England, the Glorious Revolution of 1688 set the stage for a new political order. Two main factions emerged. The Whigs, these were the progressives of their day, wanting to limit the king's power. Think rebels with powdered wigs. They supported constitutional monarchy and believed Parliament should have the upper hand. The Whigs drew support from the emerging middle class, religious dissenters, and reform-minded aristocrats. Then you have the Tories, the traditionalists who backed the monarchy, basically the king's fan club. They favored the established order and a stronger role for the monarch. Tories typically represented the interest of the land gentry and the Anglican Church. These factions would evolve into Britain's first modern political parties, setting a precedent for oppositional politics that would influence democracies worldwide. Meanwhile, France was about to experience a political upheaval that would shake Europe to its core. The French Revolution of 1789 brought radical new ideas about citizenship, equality, and the role of government. As the revolution progressed, two key factions emerged. The Jacobins, these were the hardcore revolutionaries, a bunch of angry philosophers with pitchforks. Led by Maximilien Robespierre, they pushed for radical change and weren't afraid to use violence to achieve their goals. The Jacobins advocated for a strong centralized republic, universal male suffrage, and the complete dismantling of the old feudal order. Then you have the Girondins, the more moderate bunch. They wanted revolution, but maybe with a bit less of chopping of the heads. Initially supporting a constitutional monarchy, they later backed a federal republic. The Girondins, led by figures like Jacques-Pierre Brissot, represented the interests of provincial France and were wary of Paris-centered radicalism. The clash between the factions would lead to the infamous Reign of Terror, demonstrating the volatile nature of revolutionary politics. It's crucial to understand that these political factions weren't democratic parties as we now know them today. Instead, they were primarily manifestations of elite family rivalries and power struggles among the upper classes. The common people had little direct say in these conflicts. Whether it was the Guelphs and the Ghibellines of medieval Italy, or the Whigs and Tories of the 17th century England, these groups represented competing interests with the nobility, wealthy landowners, and emerging merchant classes. While they sometimes claimed to champion broader causes, at their core, these factions were about which group of elites would hold power. The idea of mass political participation was still centuries away. These European political developments would go on to heavily influence the formation of political parties in the United States. The American founding fathers, well versed in Enlightenment philosophy and keenly aware of European political struggles, sought to create a system that would prevent the excesses that they saw across the Atlantic while still ensuring a government responsive to the people's will, or so we're told. Because as we delve deeper into these elite-controlled factions, an intriguing connection emerges with the rise of Freemasonry. The first Grand Lodge of England was established in 1717, at the height of the Whig and Tory rivalries. Notably, many prominent Whig politicians were Freemasons, including Sir Robert Walpole, often considered Britain's first Prime Minister. Some historians suggest that the Whigs, with their emphasis on progress and reform, aligned more closely with Masonic principles of enlightenment and brotherhood. In France, Masonic lodges became hotbeds of revolutionary thought, attracting intellectuals who would play later key roles in the French Revolution. The Jacobins in particular have been linked to Freemasonry. We are told that the Phrygian cap was just a liberty cap. However, its roots have deep occult connections and has been associated with secret societies since ancient times. The Jacobins might just be the final act in a centuries-long plot to overthrow the old order. According to Abbé Augustin Barruel, a French Jesuit priest, the Jacobins were far more than just a radical political club. Barruel claims that the Jacobins were the culmination of a vast, intricate conspiracy involving philosophers, Freemasons, and the mysterious order of the Illuminati. A spider's web of secret societies and hidden agendas, all converging on the Jacobin Club in revolutionary Paris. Barruel argued that the Jacobins were essentially a front for this grand coalition of conspirators. They were the adepts of impiety, the adepts of rebellion, and the adepts of anarchy, all rolled into one. The Jacobins were the muscle that finally implemented the long-held dreams of the philosophers and secret societies. While Voltaire and Rousseau laid the intellectual groundwork and the Freemasons and Illuminati worked behind the scenes, the Jacobins took center stage to bring down the monarchy and the church in a spectacularly bloody fashion. But the thing is that Barruel claimed that the Jacobins were using the same secretive hierarchical structure as the Freemasons and the Illuminati. Could the Jacobin Club have been just another lodge in this vast conspiracy, hiding in plain sight? Maximilien Robespierre, the infamous leader of the Jacobins, has been suggested to be a Freemason. While concrete evidence of his Masonic membership remains elusive, many researchers point to compelling circumstantial links between Robespierre and Freemasonry. One of the most intriguing connections is Robespierre's establishment of the Cult of the Supreme Being, this deistic belief system, which briefly became the state religion during the French Revolution, and incorporated symbolism that bears striking similarities to Masonic imagery. Moreover, the very structure and rituals of the Cult of the Supreme Being seem to echo Masonic practices. The emphasis on reason, virtue, and a supreme architect of the universe aligns closely with Masonic philosophy. Some historians argue that Robespierre may have been attempting to create a public version of Masonic ideals through this new cult. Robespierre's political ideologies, his approach to governance, and even his rhetorical style bear the hallmarks of Masonic influence. The secrecy surrounding Robespierre's personal life and the destruction of many documents during the Thermidorian reaction have only fueled speculation. The Jacobins' famous slogan, "Liberty, Equality, Fraternity," takes on a sinister new meaning in this light. Could it have been a Masonic code all along, hidden in the heart of the French Revolution? While mainstream historians might scoff at these ideas, Barruel's work invites us to look beneath the surface of the French Revolution. Were the Jacobins really the puppet masters, or were they themselves puppets in a game that had been played out for decades, if not centuries? While the exact influence of Freemasonry on these political movements is debated and often veiled in secrecy, the overlap between political and Masonic membership is undeniable. As we turn to the formation of the first US political parties, it's crucial to consider how these European political and fraternal traditions, including the possible Masonic influences, may have shaped the thinking of America's founding fathers, many of whom were known Freemasons. As Europe's political experiments were coming to an end, the American founding fathers were taking notes. They cherry-picked the best ideas, Montesquieu's separation of powers, the British Parliament's checks and balances, and the concept of opposing parties. But they didn't stop there. They conveniently mixed in some Masonic principles of brotherhood and enlightenment, sprinkled in some revolutionary spirit of the Jacobins, and topped it all off with the hefty dose of rugged individualism and distrust of centralized power. The result was a political system that looks all American on the outside, but with a European feeling. Sure, we're told it's a carefully balanced republic, mixing elite power with the common man's voice. But what if our founding fathers weren't just inspired by European ideas? What if they were actually bringing over the same secret handshakes and backdoor deals that ran the show in Europe? Think about it. Freemasonry, secret clubs, revolutionary ideas. All that stuff didn't just stay on the other side of the pond. It hopped on the same boats as our powdered wig-wearing founders. So we gotta ask ourselves, did they really cook up this new system from scratch? Or were they just setting the table for these same old power players, just with a new menu? It's no secret that many of our founding fathers were Freemasons. But just how deep did this influence go? George Washington, the OG Mason president. He was initiated in 1752 and even laid the cornerstone of the US Capitol in full Masonic regalia. Washington even invoked a great spirit in the sky when he founded the city that would bear his name. Benjamin Franklin, who wasn't just a kite flyer, even though that painting does have Freemasonic symbolism. In fact, he was a Grand Master Mason who helped write the constitutions of the Freemasons. Oh, and what's up with all those bodies under his basement? John Hancock, who probably practiced his signature at Masonic meetings. Paul Revere, when he wasn't warning about the British, he was serving as Grand Master of the Massachusetts Grand Lodge. John Paul Jones, the father of the American Navy, was raising sails in Masonic degrees. Lafayette, the French hero of the American Revolution, was initiated by none other than George Washington himself. He was also interested in mesmerism and introduced it to George Washington. But wait, there's more. So many notable Masons from this era, and that's not even considering the ones who kept their affiliation secret. The Masonic influence is everywhere, in our history and in our monuments. Why is the Washington Monument an obelisk? A giant Masonic symbol in the heart of DC? Why is the Great Seal of the US an all-seeing eye above the pyramid? Masonic symbols right in our faces. Literally, that's what our state seals are. Take a closer look and you'll find it's just all Masonic imagery. From squares and compasses to columns and all-seeing eyes. It's a secret code hidden in plain sight across the entire country. So let's begin with the first political parties in the United States. Okay, so it's 1787, and the Founding Fathers are gathered around a table, kind of like a really tense Thanksgiving dinner. Under the table, many of them are wearing Masonic aprons. On one side, we've got the Federalist. Their star player is Alexander Hamilton. Historians insist that he was not a Freemason. However, evidence shows that he visited Masonic lodges, which only members could do. Strangely, even though he was married, apparently he lived in the grip of powerful attractions to other men. I wonder what that means. Apparently, a lot of the Founding Fathers had a strong attraction to men, even George Washington, which is no surprise if you know some of the secret rituals of the Masons during the 18th century. Then there's John Adams, who's often depicted as feisty and opinionated. Funnily enough, historians again suggest that he wasn't a Mason. However, John Adams was in fact a Freemason member of the St. John's Grand Lodge in Boston, Massachusetts. On the other side, we have the Anti-Federalist. There's Thomas Jefferson. While historians often dismiss claims of Thomas Jefferson's Masonic membership, his relationship with secret societies is more complex than it appears. Jefferson was a confirmed member of the mysterious FHC Society at William and Mary College, a group so secretive its full name remains unknown. Intriguingly, he showed a keen interest in the Illuminati, defending their founder Adam Weishaupt and a letter to Bishop James Madison. Jefferson even drew parallels between the Illuminati's goals and those of Jesus Christ, suggesting a deeper understanding of esoteric philosophies. And then we have James Madison, often called the father of the Constitution, who's another founding father said not to have Masonic affiliation by historians. While not officially listed as a Freemason, tantalizing evidence suggests otherwise. John Francis Mercer, governor of Maryland, congratulated Madison on becoming a Freemason in a 1795 letter. John Dove, an early Grand Secretary of the Grand Lodge of Virginia, claimed Madison was one of the original founders of Hiram Lodge 59 in 1800. Intriguingly, Madison marched in Masonic processions and was present at cornerstone laying ceremonies conducted with full Masonic honors. The loss of many lodge records from this period makes us even more suspicious. Were they trying to hide this information? Okay, so we have the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist, and they're basically all Freemasons. The Federalists were like, we need a strong central government to keep this country together. And then the Anti-Federalists were like, whoa, big government, the state should call the shots. But here's the thing, were they really against centralization, or did they just want a different kind of order? They were all fighting over who gets to be team captain for the new country, all while playing the rules that they might have learned in the lodge. This rivalry eventually evolved into America's first official political parties. On one side, you've got the Federalist Party. Their motto might as well be, trust us, we know what's best for the country. Because they learned it in their secret meetings, right? Their hobbies include creating a national bank, hanging out with rich people, and wearing powdered wigs. Oh, and of course their lodge meetings. On the other side, there's the Democratic Republican Party. At the time, it was known as the Republican Party. However, this is not to be confused with the modern Republicans. The Democratic Republican Party was a single entity that later split into the modern Democratic and Republican parties, though not directly. The Democratic Republican Party's motto was power to the people and the states. But which people? The initiated? These guys love praising farmers, criticizing the British, and using Masonic networks to spread their message. The big picture here is that America apparently started out trying to avoid political parties, but ended up creating a two-party system in a very short period of time. It seems like they intentionally invented political drama, and we've been binge-watching ever since. Interestingly, the era of good feelings all revolves around the War of 1812, which seems to be the point of a great reset in the United States. This conflict, often overlooked in our history books, might have been more pivotal than we're led to believe. After the War of 1812, the Federalist Party, the original elite political party, suddenly crumbled. But why? On the surface, we're told it was due to their opposition to the war, which made them appear unpatriotic. But could there be more to the story? Well, the War of 1812 saw the burning of Washington, D.C., including the White House and the Capitol. In the aftermath, we see a rapid decline of the Federalist and a rise of Masonic influence in rebuilding efforts. Is it a mere coincidence that many of the architects and planners involved in the Reconstruction were Freemasons? Moreover, the war's end ushered in a new economic era, with the chartering of the Second Bank of the United States in 1816. But here's the thing, the Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, had originally championed the idea of a strong central bank. They established the first Bank of the United States in 1791. The Democratic Republicans, on the other hand, initially opposed the idea, viewing it as unconstitutional and a threat to state rights. But after the War of 1812, something strange happened. The Democratic-Republican controlled Congress and presidency under James Madison, yes, the same party that had opposed central banking, chartered the second bank of the United States. It was as if the Democratic Republicans had adopted a key Federalist policy just as the Federalist Party itself was fading into obscurity. This begs the question, who really stood to gain from this new financial order? Was this shift a result of wartime pragmatism? Or were there unseen forces at work manipulating both parties to serve a hidden agenda? By 1816, the Federalist Party couldn't even field a presidential candidate. Was this truly just political unpopularity? Or had they served their purpose in introducing the concept of central banking, only to be discarded once the Democratic Republicans could be brought around to the idea? The central bank was the central government. So the real story of the Federalist decline, the Democratic-Republican shift on banking policy, and the subsequent era of good feelings may be hidden in the shadows of secret societies and backroom deals. Could this period represent not just a political realignment, but a consolidation of power by financial elites and secret societies, now able to influence policy regardless of which party held power? After the War of 1812, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans essentially merged, ending the first party system in the United States. As the second party system emerged in 1824 to 1828, the Democratic-Republican Party split into two factions. The Jacksonian faction, which evolved into the modern Democratic Party in the 1830s, and the Henry Clay faction, which was later absorbed by Clay's Whig Party. We'll delve deeper into these new parties shortly, but it's crucial to note that before the second party system could fully take shape, another significant political entity emerged. Between the decline of the first party system and the rise of the second, a unique party formed that would shake the foundations of American politics: the Anti-Masonic Party. Interestingly, modern Freemasons often point to this period as the origin of many conspiracy theories about their organization secretly controlling government. The Anti-Masonic Party, America's third political party, and arguably the first with a platform beyond the centralization versus state power debate, brought these suspicions to the forefront of national discourse. Their distrust of Freemasons was unequivocal and formed the core of their political identity. However, the anti-Masonic movement itself was not without its own controversies and suspicious elements. This chapter of American history marks a crucial turning point, where secret societies, political power, and public paranoia intersected in ways that would shape conspiracy theories for generations to come. This all started, supposedly, because of the Morgan Affair. The Morgan Affair of 1826 was a pivotal event that sparked the anti-Masonic movement in the United States. At its center was William Morgan, a resident of Batavia, New York, whose disappearance and presumed murder in 1826 ignited a powerful movement against the Freemasons. You see, Morgan had announced his intention to publish a book exposing Freemasonry's secrets. He was going to publish an exposé titled Illustrations of Masonry, critical of the Freemasons and revealing their secret degree ceremonies in detail. Then, he was arrested on trumped-up charges. Now keep in mind, William Morgan was a Freemason himself. He was a former member of the Eastern Star Lodge and even attempted to form a Royal Arch chapter in Batavia, but was rejected by local Masons. It was this that led him to retaliate, and supposedly, he threatened to expose all of Mason's secrets. However, the strange part about this is, then why would you collaborate with a news publisher, David Miller, in order to announce that you're going to be doing this? Seems a little suspicious. Because, immediately after this announcement, Freemasons took immediate action against Morgan and Miller. Apparently they attempted to burn Miller's newspaper office, and then Morgan was arrested on charges of theft, which was widely believed to be fabricated. On September 11, 1826, Morgan was arrested for supposed non-payment of a loan and allegedly stealing a shirt and a tie. On September 12, 1826, Morgan was released from jail by two men claiming to have paid his debt. He was last seen being forced into a carriage. This caused an immediate uproar, and despite extensive searches and a substantial reward offered by Governor DeWitt Clinton, no body was ever found. And keep in mind, Governor Clinton was himself a Grand Master Mason. The Morgan affair ignited widespread anti-Masonic sentiment, culminating in the formation of the Anti-Masonic Party in 1828. This controversy lasted nearly 2 decades until the late 1840s, and was a pivotal factor in Freemasonry's apparent decline. However, it's possible this period marked not only a true decline, but a strategic retreat into greater secrecy. The Freemasons may have used this turbulent time to shed their past stigma and recalibrate their public image. Intriguingly, despite Morgan's disappearance, his exposé was still published by Miller. This does raise questions about the true nature of the incident. Was it really a genuine attempt at suppression, or a calculated PR maneuver? If absolute secrecy was the goal, surely they would have silenced Miller as well. It's crucial to note that Morgan's book only unveils the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, the Blue Lodge degrees. Having been rejected from the Royal Arch degree, Morgan couldn't reveal Freemasonry's deepest secrets. This selective transparency might have been a strategic move, allowing lower degree practices to be exposed to dispel broader suspicions while protecting the truly sensitive information of higher degrees. But even these lower degree rituals are bizarrely incongruous with the public personas of the politicians and elites associated with them. The practices described are strange and archaic. You have elaborate initiation rituals involving blindfolds, symbolic objects, and solemn oaths, sacred handshakes, passwords, and gestures for identification, dramatic esoteric reenactments like Hiram Abiff's murder, a degree system with escalating complexity and symbolism, emphasis on secrecy about the group's practices, a blend of multiple religious elements with moral teachings, references to ancient history and architecture, particularly Solomon's Temple, odd physical postures and movements in ceremonies, anachronistic roles and titles, and finally mixture of practical morality with esoteric symbolism and mysticism. Now, these Blue Lodge degrees are relatively accessible, leading some to dismiss Freemasonry as merely a benign social club focused on self-improvement and philanthropy. However, this accessible facade may serve to obscure the more guarded higher degrees and exclusive orders, reserved for a select few and protected by even greater secrecy. The true nature and influence of Freemasonry may lie in these hidden echelons, far from public scrutiny. The Anti-Masonic Party emerged as the first significant opposition to Andrew Jackson's Democratic Party, marking a crucial moment in American political history. As the first third party in United States history to seriously contest elections on a national scale, it set the stage for future political movements. Initially, the anti-Masons positioned themselves as the antithesis to the Jacksonian Democrats, who were perceived as closely aligned with Freemasonry. This stance was particularly interesting given that Jackson himself was a prominent Freemason. Interestingly, the Anti-Masonic Party introduced several political innovations, most notably the concept of national nominating conventions, holding the first one for a presidential candidate in 1831. While the Anti-Masonic Party initially focused on opposition to Freemasonry, it soon broadened its platform to include other reform issues, expanding its appeal. On the surface, this conflict was portrayed as a struggle between the common man and the elite. However, is that really the full story? The idea that the anti-Masons truly represented the common man against the elite is questionable at best. In reality, many anti-Masonic leaders were themselves part of the social and political elite. Moreover, The party's eventual transition into the Whig Party, which included many Freemasons in its ranks, suggests that the anti-Masonic stance was more of a political strategy than a genuine ideological divide. This transformation from the anti-Masonic party to the Whig Party is crucial to understanding the evolution of American political parties. The anti-Masons became the Whigs, which later became the Republicans. This transition occurred in the mid-1830s as the anti-Masonic party began to supposedly lose momentum. Several prominent anti-Masonic leaders played key roles in the merger. William H. Seward, former anti-Masonic governor of New York, became a leading Whig and later a Republican. Thaddeus Stevens, a staunch anti-Mason from Pennsylvania, transitioned to the Whig Party and eventually became a Republican leader. Millard Fillmore, who started his political career as an anti-Mason, became a Whig and later the 13th U.S. president. John Quincy Adams, while not originally an anti-Mason, allied with the party and then became a key figure in the Whig Party. William Wirt, the anti-Masonic presidential candidate in 1832, later aligned with the Whigs. The Whig Party formed as a coalition of anti-Masons, National Republicans, and other groups opposed to Andrew Jackson's policies. This merger allowed former anti-Masons to broaden their political influence beyond the single issue of opposing Freemasonry. So first, it was anti-Masons versus Democrats, or basically anti-Masons versus Freemasons. Then the anti-Masons became the Whigs, which eventually evolved into the Republican Party. While the Freemasons were primarily associated with the Democrats, this isn't to say that the Whigs were still anti-Masons. In fact, the anti-Mason stance appears to have been more of a political strategy than a genuine ideological position. After joining the Whig Party, both major parties were significantly influenced by Freemasons. Notable Whig Freemasons included William Henry Harrison, the 9th U.S. President, John Tyler, the 10th U.S. President, Millard Fillmore, the 13th U.S. President, Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, and Winfield Scott. So Freemasonry was deeply embedded in the Whig Party, despite its anti-Masonic origins. The presence of prominent Freemasons in both major parties suggests that the initial anti-Masonic movement may have been more about political maneuvering than genuine opposition to Masonic influence. In essence, the anti-Masons was a charade, simply a front, and the underlying influence of Freemasonry remained a constant, transcending party lines and shaping American politics in ways that were not always apparent to the general public. The origin of Freemasonic conspiracies in America can be traced back to the anti-Masonic party. Modern Freemasons often dismiss the multitude of leaked 19th century rituals as mere anti-Masonic propaganda. However, what's rarely discussed is the fact that the anti-Masonic movement itself was, ironically, initiated by Freemasons. The anti-Masonic party served as a clever cover-up, a means to control and contain the emerging conspiracies. As ex-Freemasons began revealing lodge secrets, the creation of the party allowed Masons to manage the narrative. It gave the illusion that the citizens could vote for elites who opposed Freemasonry, while in reality, these opponents were part of the very system they claimed to fight. The inevitable failure of the anti-Masons to gain significant power was, in retrospect, a foregone conclusion. After all, how could a nation founded by Freemasonic elites genuinely allow an anti-Masonic party to rise to prominence? This was, in effect, a masterful example of controlled opposition. The ultimate goal was to relegate all leaked information and accusations to the realm of conspiracy, effectively discrediting it. This strategy laid the groundwork for what we now recognize as conspiracy theories in the United States, particularly the concept of a shadowy cabal controlling events from behind the scenes. In this light, the anti-Masonic movement appears less as a genuine opposition and more as a sophisticated ploy to shape public perception, and control the narrative surrounding secret societies in America. Okay, but this is when things get really bizarre. There's actually a book published in 1895 that's based on the Morgan event and might be revealing of hidden truths about the whole affair. It's this trippy fantasy book, which some of you may have heard of. It's called Edda Dorpa. I'm pretty sure whoever wrote this was on some serious drugs, as many others have concluded. It's a bizarre story, but it doesn't seem to be your typical sci-fi or fantasy novel. It's more of an occult novel, and the author presents it as if it really happened. Edda Dorpa is Aphrodite spelled backwards, and the first editions of the book were distributed privately. The second edition features a pyramid with the Star of David and an X on it, which is common in Freemasonic imagery. This book deserves its own video, but I'm bringing it up because it's basically about how William Morgan was initiated into an elite brotherhood after being kidnapped. In the book, he's called I Am the Man. The main protagonist, who was initially a member of a secret society, implied to be the Freemasons. He threatens to expose their secrets, which leads to his kidnapping, just like the actual Morgan event. Except this time, we learn about what really happened to Morgan. I'll quickly summarize the story, but let me break down how this is a Freemasonic book disguised as a fantasy novel. The author, John Uri Lloyd, was a pharmacist and a chemist interested in the occult and alchemy. It's not clear if he was a Freemason, but the book's illustrator, J. Augustus Knapp, was a famous Freemasonic illustrator. Knapp is best known for his esoteric paintings featured in Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Interestingly, Knapp himself was a Theosophist and an honorary 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason. His illustrations for Edda Dorpa are insane and make the story even more intriguing. That alone deeply associates the book with Freemasonry, but the entire story itself is filled with Freemasonic symbolism. The story is told as a history, not a fantasy, and the full name of the book is actually Edda Dorpa, or The End of the Earth, the strange history of a mysterious being and the account of a remarkable journey. The author gets a manuscript from a friend named Drury, who's our main character in the story. Now Drury gets this manuscript from a mysterious man called I Am the Man, or I Am the Man Who Did It. This guy appears out of nowhere, kind of like a ghost, but he's not a ghost. Just some strange old man with superhuman powers. They basically make an agreement that this old man is going to tell Drury an account of what happened to him, which is detailed in this manuscript. Drury is then supposed to keep it sealed for 30 years before publishing it. So eventually, the old guy, I Am the Man, starts telling him this insane story. But get this old man is William Morgan. It's the same exact story as the historical event, but we get more details and find out what happens to him after the disappearance. So, I Am the Man, aka William Morgan, begins his story by discussing how he grew unsatisfied with conventional knowledge and wanted a deeper understanding of the occult and alchemy. Through his studies, he discovers that there's a brotherhood of adepts, a secret fraternity of alchemists, including politicians, clergymen, lawyers, and scientists who secretly study deep occult knowledge. It's even mentioned that they specifically conceal their affiliation to maintain their professional reputations. Wild, right? William is then given a letter with instructions on how to join the secret society by an unknown member. The letter details that this brotherhood has existed since ancient times and is in pursuit of an advanced state of consciousness. Inspired by the letter, William joins the secret society, or cult, accepting its pledges. Well, William joins the secret order and immediately decides that his intent was to reveal their secrets to the public, believing it would benefit humanity. He writes a detailed account of everything he learned in a document he intended to publish as My Confession. So the secret society finds out about this, and they warn him not to do it. Yet William is stubborn and persists with his plan to publish the manuscript. Just like the real-life history of William Morgan, he's then arrested on charges of debt, and they even attempt to use arson to destroy his manuscript. While William is put into jail and then kidnapped on the exact same year as the real-life Morgan event. The only difference is in the book it occurred on August 12th, 1826 instead of September 12th. So it's quite obvious what they're referencing here. But we find out what happened to him after he got kidnapped. Apparently, his punishment for wanting to reveal the secrets of the Brotherhood is a lengthened life in a state of consciousness between life and death. He's brought to a remote location where he's forced to embark on a crazy journey as a form of punishment, but also to be enlightened. The book uses the number 7 symbolically several times. Drury meets with William on the 7th, and after William's taken to this remote location, 7 hooded men surround him. Using chemicals, they alchemically alter his appearance. William was a younger man, but using chemicals and fumes, they end up making him look like an old man so that no one will recognize him anymore. They give him a chance to try to convince people that he is William, like the jailer, but no one believes him and they think he's insane. I thought this was pretty crazy, because it's the first insight that this brotherhood has some knowledge and techniques not known to the common man, like drastically altering one's appearance. So William gives up on his old life and proceeds to continue his journey or punishment with his new guide. He's taken to Kentucky, where he's introduced to this very bizarre alien-looking humanoid, the man with no sight. This being guides him to the center of the earth through an underground river somewhere in Kentucky, which actually could be based on some type of truth, as there are many caves in this location. This is where it gets into the hollow earth theory, which is what most of you may know about the book. I find it interesting because it doesn't seem to be just fantasy. Throughout this whole section, the theme is to disprove modern science's understanding of the laws that govern the surface, which are different in this underground world. But it's so much more than just a journey to the center of the earth type novel. Actually, the author was inspired by Vril, The Power of the Coming Race, which details an advanced civilization that lives underground and has developed spiritual powers such as telepathy and healing. In Edda Dorpa, it's the same thing. They journey further underground, and we find out that there's a life-enhancing quality to the air, which makes the need for breathing, eating, and sleeping unnecessary. I won't dive too deep into the rest of the book. You can check it out yourself. But the reason I bring it up is twofold. First, it's literally based on the Morgan event. Second, it involves a brotherhood of adepts journeying through what's essentially Zoroaster's cave. In this case, an underground world. This could be symbolic of developing occult powers, but there might be a literal truth to it as well. In the book, it's a brotherhood of alchemists, but it's obviously referring to William Morgan. Towards the end, when William is about to make a leap into the very center of the earth, he almost quits. But then the sightless guide says, Hiram Abiff, blatantly referencing Freemasonic rituals, which pushes him to continue. The whole murder of Hiram Abiff is even mentioned in the actual real-life William Morgan expose as part of the lower degrees, so it's not a stretch to say this whole book is a Freemasonic allegory. Even crazier, the end of the book gives instructions to remove the page, meaning it's incomplete on purpose. This might explain why the first edition was exchanged privately. That could have been the full version. Now, of course, many of you will say, okay, that's just fantasy. But maybe there's something more to these ideas. Perhaps there's truth to this concept of Agartha, or advanced spiritual civilizations underground. It's a prevalent myth in many different cultures. But the biggest reason I bring this up is that the book essentially reveals that politicians and the highest players of society are involved with an occult brotherhood, kept secret through oaths. Their love for Aphrodite, the pursuit of occult wisdom, which, The rose is the symbol of Aphrodite. In Freemasonry, the rose is a sacred symbol in connection with secret meetings. This is kept underground, which could be allegory, but think about it. What are all these underground tunnels in every major US city really for? Just prohibition tunnels? Or is there truth to this idea of adepts meeting underground and pursuing occult powers? Essentially, what it reveals is that the elites, especially during this early period of politics in the US and Europe, were fascinated and deeply involved with the occult and alchemy. That alone should raise suspicion. Perhaps they've developed occult powers beyond our understanding, which is the end result in Edadorpa. After the journey through Zoroaster's cave, you essentially develop superhuman abilities, like a lengthened lifespan, telepathy, and the ability to consciously astral project. It's wild to think about, but when you connect the dots, it makes you wonder just how much of this fantasy might be rooted in reality. So after the 1830s, the anti-Masonic Party, once a powerful force in American politics, began to crumble. We're told that their singular focus on opposing Freemasonry proved insufficient to sustain a national movement, or perhaps their purpose was fulfilled. As mentioned, many of the leaders of the anti-Masonic Party migrated to the Whig Party, which became the next platform to challenge Andrew Jackson's Democrats. The second party system was the Democrats against the Whigs. The Democrats, led by Andrew Jackson, championed the common man, opposed a national bank, favored westward expansion, and supported state rights. They appealed to farmers, laborers, and frontier settlers. The Whigs, on the other hand, supported a national bank, federal funding for internal improvements, and a protective tariff. They found support among business owners, bankers, and those favoring a stronger federal government. However, let's keep in mind that both these parties were heavily influenced, if not controlled, by Freemasons. Andrew Jackson was a high-ranking Freemason and frequently used Masonic symbols and references in his campaigns. His infamous bank war against the Second Bank of the United States could be seen as a conflict between Masonic factions, with the bank itself often perceived as a Masonic institution. On the Whig side, even though they supposedly opposed Jackson, they too harbored many prominent Masons in their ranks. Henry Clay, the main Whig leader, was the Grand Master of Kentucky. William Henry Harrison, the first Whig president, was also a Mason. How can we truly believe these people were fighting each other when they were part of the same brotherhood? One thing that's very strange, but also revealing in the history of American politics, is the Know Nothing Party. Okay, what kind of name is that for a party? Well, most people have never heard of them, and if they have, it's mostly for their anti-immigrant sentiments. They later became the American Party, and believed in a Catholic conspiracy to subvert civil and religious liberty in the United States. But to me, the weirdest part about them is that the members of the party had to belong to the secret order of the Star-Spangled Banner, which was formed in New York City, and soon after, lodges formed in nearly every other major American city. So this was some type of offshoot of Freemasonry? And even stranger, members, when asked about their nativist organizations, were supposed to reply that they knew nothing, hence the name. To join the order, a man had to be at least 21 years old, a Protestant, and willing to obey the order's dictates without question. Okay, so even in mainstream history, we have a secret order forcing their members and political candidates to follow the will of the Brotherhood. That's literally creating puppets, and they know nothing, meaning they have to keep this stuff a secret. I mean, how blatant can you be? It's almost like they're not even trying to hide the fact that a secret society was pulling the strings of a major political movement. I mean, it's right there in the history books. It makes you wonder, if this is what they were doing openly, what else might have been going on behind the scenes? Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of this era was the growing interest in spiritualism and occult practices among political figures. This trend is often overlooked in mainstream historical accounts. William Henry Harrison, the first Whig president, was known to have an interest in esoteric matters. His inaugural address, the longest in history, was filled with classical and what some interpret as Masonic references. His sudden death after just 31 days in office sparked rumors of a Masonic curse. The Masonic curse was said to affect those who betray Masonic secrets or work against Masonic interests. They would face supernatural retribution. In Harrison's case, some speculated that his short presidency was a result of angering Masonic forces. But it was during the Pierce and Buchanan administrations that spiritualism truly took a hold in Washington. Franklin Pierce, grieving the loss of his son, participated in seances in the White House. His wife, Jane Pierce, was known to consult mediums regularly, seeking to communicate with their deceased child. James Buchanan, though not a spiritualist himself, was surrounded by those who were. His niece and de facto First Lady, Harriet Lane, was fascinated by the movement. The White House during this period became a hub for mediums and seances, with politicians and their wives frequently participating. Even Abraham Lincoln attended seances at the behest of his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. She became deeply involved in spiritualism after the death of their son Willie, often inviting mediums to the White House to conduct seances. Actually, William Seward, Lincoln's Secretary of State, petitioned Congress on behalf of spiritualists to fund research into spirit communication. The rise of spiritualism in America can be traced back to the Fox sisters in 1848. Kate and Margaret Fox claimed they could communicate with spirits through a series of knocks. Their demonstrations caught the public's imagination and sparked the spiritualist movement. President Millard Fillmore, intrigued by these claims, invited the Fox sisters to the White House in 1852 for a demonstration of their purported abilities. While the mainstream narrative suggests that the Fox sisters were mere tricksters who fooled gullible people, including powerful politicians, this simplistic explanation may not capture the full complexity of the situation. Is it plausible that some of the most influential men in American politics were so easily deceived? Perhaps the Fox sisters' story serves as a convenient cover for the deeper occult interest of the political elite. The sisters' eventual confession of fraud led many to dismiss the entire spiritualist movement as a hoax. However, this overlooks a crucial fact. Occult rituals and seances were indeed conducted multiple times within the White House, regardless of their efficacy. The point isn't whether these practices were real, but rather that the nation's leaders were actively engaging in attempts to communicate with spirits. This aligns suspiciously well with one of Freemasonry's purported secrets: the ability to converse with angels and higher beings for guidance. Could the public narrative of grieving first ladies trying to contact deceased children be a smokescreen for more esoteric practices? It's worth considering that a sudden interest in seances seems unlikely without prior familiarity with occult concepts. Furthermore, the timing of the spiritualist movement's rise coincides with Freemasonry's need to rebuild its public image after the anti-Masonic period. Could the spiritualist movement have been a way to normalize certain occult ideas, or to perceive them as a simple trick in the public consciousness, making Masonic occult practices seem less likely to be real? While obviously we can't prove that the Fox sisters were part of a larger cover-up, the story certainly provides a convenient narrative that distracts from the undeniable fact that occult practices were indeed occurring at the highest levels of government, rooted in traditions and beliefs that long predated the spiritualist movement. As the nation expanded westward, Freemasonry played a significant role. The concept of manifest destiny championed by the Democrats, resonated with Masonic ideals of spreading light and civilization. James K. Polk, another Masonic president, oversaw the massive territorial gains of the Mexican-American War. During this conflict, military lodges proliferated among American troops. These lodges served not only as social outlets for soldiers, but also as a means of spreading Masonic influence into newly acquired territories. Some historians argue that this Masonic presence played a role in the rapid integration of these areas into the United States. The California Gold Rush of 1849 saw a further spread of Masonic lodges westward. Many of the new settlements established lodges early on, often before other civic institutions. Why was Freemasonry so important in establishing order in frontier societies? While Masonry and occult interest were gaining ground in some circles, they faced opposition from another powerful force, the Second Great Awakening. This religious revival movement, emphasizing personal salvation and moral reform, often clashed with Masonic ideals. This created a spiritual tug-of-war in the American psyche. On one hand, there was the allure of ancient wisdom and secret knowledge offered by Masonry and spiritualism. On the other, there was the emotional appeal of evangelical Christianity, calling for moral purity and rejection of secretive practices. Some politicians navigated this divide by maintaining public Christian personas while privately exploring esoteric practices. This double life would become a recurring theme in American politics, with public professions of faith often masking deeper involvement in secretive organizations. The second party system laid the groundwork for much of what we see in modern American politics. The Masonic and occult undercurrents of this period established patterns of hidden influence that would persist long after the Whig Party's demise. As the 1850s progressed, the Whig Party began to fracture over the issue of slavery. This division, coupled with the rise of nativism and the controversy over the Kansas-Nebraska Act, led to the party's collapse. From its ashes rose the Republican Party in 1854, absorbing many former Whigs, Free Soilers, and anti-slavery Democrats. The transition from Whigs to Republicans did not diminish the influence of Freemasonry in politics. Many prominent early Republicans were Freemasons, continuing the tradition of Masonic involvement in American governance. For instance, Abraham Lincoln, while not a Mason himself, was surrounded by Masonic influences. His vice president, Andrew Johnson, was a Mason, as were several members of his cabinet. James Garfield, the 20th president and a Republican, was a Master Mason and a member of Magnolia Lodge No. 20 in Columbus, Ohio. William McKinley, the 25th president, was also a devoted Mason, having received his degrees in Hiram Lodge No. 21 in Winchester, Virginia. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president, was a member of Matinacock Lodge No. 806 in Oyster Bay, New York. These are just a few examples of the continued Masonic presence in the Republican Party. The shift from Whigs to Republicans did not represent a break from Masonic influence, but rather a continuation of it under a new political banner. The second party system collapsed after the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. This act effectively repealed the Missouri Compromise of 1820, allowing new states to decide for themselves whether to permit slavery. This upset the Whigs because it reopened the issue of slavery expansion, which the party had been struggling to navigate. The Whig Party, unable to maintain a unified stance on slavery, began to disintegrate. Contrary to some modern misconceptions, the early Republican Party was staunchly opposed to slavery. Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president elected in 1860, campaigned on a platform of stopping slavery's expansion, which eventually led to its abolition. The Republicans of this era viewed slavery as morally wrong and economically backward. On the other hand, the Democratic Party of the time, particularly its southern wing, strongly supported the continuation and expansion of slavery. Despite portraying themselves as champions of the common man, Democrats defended the institution of slavery, arguing it was essential to the Southern economy and social order. This stance would lead to the party's fracturing and the secession of the Southern states following Lincoln's election. Interestingly, even within the abolitionist movement, Freemasonry had a significant presence. Frederick Douglass, one of the most prominent abolitionists, was a Prince Hall Freemason. The Civil War, often portrayed as a battle between brothers, takes on a new dimension when viewed through the lens of Freemasonry. Both Union and Confederate forces boasted high-ranking Freemasons among their officers and politicians. Union General George B. McClellan and Confederate General Albert Pike, for instance, were both prominent Freemasons. This fraternal connection across enemy lines raises intriguing questions. Was the Civil War a staged conflict designed to usher in a new era? Where is the photographic evidence of this event? Despite photography being well developed by the 1860s, there's a curious absence of actual battle photographs from the Civil War. We have numerous photos of encampments and posed scenes, but live combat photos are non-existent. The common explanation is exposure issues, but that seems inadequate given the technology available at the time. Even more puzzling are the manipulated images. For example, the famous photograph of General Grant at City Point is a composite image. More strikingly, the iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln was created by superimposing his head onto the body of John C. Calhoun. The original Calhoun portrait features a checkerboard floor and a globe, common motifs in Freemasonic symbolism. Perhaps most disturbing are the dead soldiers in some of the war's most famous portraits. These were often living men asked to pose as corpses, creating a theatrical representation of war rather than documenting its true horrors. Despite the general acceptance today that Lincoln was not a Freemason, the persistence of this discussion in Masonic circles is noteworthy. An entire article debating Lincoln's Masonic status appeared in Masonic literature. There's a photo of Lincoln in Masonic attire, held in the library of the Grand Lodge's museum. However, they say that it's a fake. But the thing is, why would Freemasons engage in such a debate if there wasn't some basis for the claim? If Lincoln was definitely not a Mason, then why did a fake photo exist in official Masonic archives? Could this be a deliberate attempt to obscure Lincoln's true relationship with Freemasonry? It's worth noting that Lincoln was surrounded by Freemasons, including his vice president. He also reportedly expressed interest in joining the fraternity shortly before his assassination. But why would Masons even be arguing about this? Was it a calculated move to distance one of America's most revered presidents from an organization that has faced periods of controversy and suspicion? Given the Freemasons' influence in politics of that era, it's plausible that there might be reasons to either claim or deny Lincoln's affiliation, depending on the political climate. Was John Wilkes Booth a Freemason? Well, by this time, they obviously were already aware that it's suspicious if everyone is a Freemason. However, there is a famous photo of Booth with his hand in his jacket, which is a Freemasonic gesture. Remember, Lincoln was assassinated in a theater, a stage show, and John Wilkes Booth's brother, Edwin Thomas Booth, was a Freemason and has the same exact photo with his hand in his jacket. John Wilkes Booth wasn't just an actor turned assassin, he was a member of the Knights of the Golden Circle, a secret society born from Freemasonry in 1854. These guys literally wanted to create a whole new country called the Golden Circle. Now this is where it gets interesting. People who laugh off the idea of Freemasons controlling everything or dismiss the Illuminati as just a conspiracy theory are missing the bigger picture. There's a whole web of secret societies, all branching off from the same root, like the Templars, but each with their own agenda. The KJC wasn't just some fringe group. We're talking about members in President Buchanan's cabinet, like the Secretary of War and Treasury, even the Vice President, John Breckinridge, was in on it. These guys were planning to kidnap Lincoln before he could take office and install their own president, which goes to show the connection between secret societies and assassinations. The KGC borrowed Masonic symbols and had ties to the Scottish Rite, but for some reason, this history is conveniently not taught in schools. During this era, politicians were involved in various other secret societies besides Freemasonry. The Independent Order of Oddfellows, or IOF, boasted several presidential members, including Ulysses S. Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, and William McKinley. The Oddfellows are suspicious because of their extensive network of orphanages across the United States. Intriguingly, their symbolism often incorporated elements associated with the occult, such as the all-seeing eye and the skull and crossbones. The Improved Order of Red Men, despite its name, paradoxically excluded Native Americans until the 1970s. Its membership included Presidents Warren G. Harding and Franklin D. Roosevelt, the latter also being a Freemason. Oh, and interestingly, the Freemason Henry A. Wallace, Franklin D. Roosevelt's vice president, was deeply interested in mysticism and the occult. He was involved with theosophy, astrology, and Native American spirituality. Wallace is the one who suggested using the eye and pyramid symbol from the Great Seal on US currency, seeing it as representing a New Deal of the ages. The Knights of Pythias counted William McKinley and William Jennings Bryan among its members. Notably, McKinley held simultaneous memberships in the Oddfellows, Knights of Pythias, and Freemasons, showcasing the overlapping nature of these societies. The Order of the Eastern Star, often described as a Masonic adjacent organization for women, uses an inverted pentagram as its symbol, similar to Satanism. Founded by prominent Freemason Rob Morris in 1850, the Eastern Star's influence extended into the highest echelons of American society and politics. Notable members included Eleanor Roosevelt, Clara Barton, founder of the American Red Cross, Bess Truman, Rosa Parks, Edith Wilson, Martha Washington, and Mamie Eisenhower. Is there a reason why so many First Ladies and prominent civil rights leaders were associated with this female Freemasonry? It does seem strange. Abraham Lincoln may not be accepted as a Freemason today. However, he did apply for membership in the Tyrian Lodge in Springfield. Intriguingly, there exists a painting of Lincoln titled "Writing the Proclamation of Freedom," and in this artwork's background, you can clearly see a Freemasonic square and compass with an all-seeing eye. Why would they include this prominent Masonic symbolism in a painting depicting Lincoln during such a historically significant moment? I mean, that's pretty striking. What are we supposed to think? After the Civil War, the Knights of the Golden Circle didn't simply disappear. Many historians believe they evolved into the Ku Klux Klan. This transformation carried over some of the occult symbolism and ritualistic practices from the KGC, blending them with a racist ideology. The KKK's use of elaborate titles, secret passwords, and initiation rites echoed those of Freemasonry and the KGC. Notably, several prominent Democrats of the era were affiliated with the KKK, including Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia and Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black. Freemasonry, contrary to some beliefs, never truly died out. Instead, it adapted. In some cases, it became more discreet, while in others it remained openly influential. By this time, the Freemasons had largely succeeded in shaping public perception of their order. They had reached a point where the occasional president or high-ranking official being a Mason no longer raised significant alarm. The key was maintaining balance, enough visibility to retain influence, but not so much as to invite scrutiny. It didn't matter if a few presidents were known Masons. What mattered was avoiding the appearance that everyone in power was associated with the order. This strategic approach allowed Freemasonry to continue its influence behind the scenes, representing a more benign face to the public. As politics progressed into the modern day, there were many more Freemasonic politicians, both in the Democrats and the Republicans. William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, Warren G. Harding, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Harry S. Truman, Lyndon B. Johnson, Gerald Ford were all Freemasons. This doesn't include many vice presidents and other high-ranking officials like the first director of the FBI. And note that even though Freemasonry is not as popular as it was at the beginning of American politics, it remains a cornerstone of the political landscape. Additionally, there are other groups such as Skull and Bones and Bohemian Grove that add to the weirdness of politicians being associated with these occult fraternities. How are we to believe that there is truly a democratic process at hand when a secret occult brotherhood, interested in ancient rites and secret oaths, is behind the main two political parties? Sure, you can say Freemasonry is just a social club. You might have a family member or friend who's a Freemason and they only do good for the community. Again, those are the Blue Lodge degrees. They opened up the lodges to the community for that exact perception. There are higher degrees that are not open to the common man, and whose practices are guarded with the greatest secrecy. So why is the idea of a shadow government, or the concept of the Illuminati, treated with such ridicule? Almost all mainstream political commentators and streamers today won't even consider it. Perhaps it's because they do not understand how deeply ingrained the cult is with the founding of the United States. This isn't even to mention corporate and foreign influence. There are many more rabbit holes to explore once you open this concept of the political elite being connected to the occult. We'll leave this historical and avoid more recent events, but the idea does shed light on what's happening today. We're given the illusion of choice, and perhaps this was done by design. With that, let us know your thoughts in the comments, and all we can hope is that our minds may be unveiled.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?